Hey, Adia, it is so nice to finally meet you, kind of in person, but also sort of virtually. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. It's Adia, actually.
Adia? Okay, my
Yep.
apologies.
No, it's okay.
I know you and I connected just over LinkedIn, and we figured it'd be good to hop on and just have a conversation. As I was mentioning kind of before we got started, it seems like what really the main thing I want to talk about with you is really everything you're focused on with building this brand new go-to-market motion that you're kind of building with Ask Elephant. But I'd be super curious on some of your previous experience as well. What I'd love is if you just give me like a brief introduction of some of your experience and then what you're really focused on right now.
Yeah, okay. So I am Adia Toll. I'm head of sales development at Ask Elephant. I started Ask Elephant 18 months ago, and I was a founding SDR here, and we've slowly grown up and built a team around me. It's been fantastic. Before that, I was at a little company called GoTo or LastPass, if you're aware of the LastPass brand. And I had started as an SDR there. I actually got the job by accident. And so in 4 years, I went from not knowing what an SDR was, never heard of a CRM or any of this stuff, to being functionally a director of my own function in this space.
Yeah, is that LastPass? Is that like the password
It
site?
is.
Okay. No, that's sweet. And you said so for Ask Elephant, how many people did it start with? Like, is that you said you started it, or do you guys work with a couple partners? What did it look like at the very beginning?
So I was the seventh hire and the first sales revenue hire. So before me, it was the CEO and then the product team.
Wow. And you said how many people are total now in the on the sales team?
On the sales side, gosh, I think there's about 20 people in the revenue team.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
then kind of paint me a picture of like what you're focused on right now, just from an overall go-to-market perspective. I know I have some experience with like it's more like a mid-market startup in the way we went go-to-market with a new product, but not as much go-to-market with like a brand new business. So I'm super curious like what that landscape looks like.
Okay, I have very strong opinions about companies that go to market with new products because I think a lot of companies are try to go to market in a different way for secondary products than they do initially, instead of following the typical like 0 to 1, let's go through and scale. And most companies should act like a startup every time they launch a product in that process. That being said, gosh, what do I want to talk about with this? There's so many stories to tell about getting us from zero to where we are today. And we are still at the early stages of this. We're still pre-series A. Right now, my biggest focus is I'm trying to focus on owned audience capture for our brand on the thought leader perspective and marketing and try to bridge those two things, which is a very specific, very in the weeds topic. But I'm trying to build out the infrastructure so that as we are doing thought leader creation, I'm doing things and our founder is doing things and we're building up these personalized brands. And then we have our marketing, building a brand for Ask Elephant, trying to combine those two audiences and bridge those two audiences. 'Cause right now they're separate. That makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it feels like that's something like you and the founder are kind of taking on as almost just like a new vertical of eventual like brand building and acquisition. Is that something that you're having your teams do as well, or is that really just something you guys are doing more as like a founder team?
So I fully believe that every SDR should be doing this. And if you're on the revenue team, that you're an SDR. I don't care if you're a CSM or you're an AE, you're an SDR, you work with me. The reason I have that perspective is pipeline and outbound is everybody's job. It might be one person's full-time job and not your full-time job, but everybody has a responsibility to contribute to pipeline. And one of the best ways to do that is to build trust. How familiar are you with Ask Elephant?
Ask Elephant. I mean, I looked at like the basics of what I could find online. I know we were going to talk about it a little bit more specifically, but yeah, definitely give like a quick overview.
Well, the reason I ask is because the thesis behind Ask Elephant is that instead of using AI to help like try to take away from the human and go and scale automated messaging or just blast everyone with the same message. What AI should be doing is making it to everything that a salesperson does, everything that anyone in a revenue seat does is have conversations. Like they should be doing what they're best at, everything that's not customer facing, from updating the CRM to, I don't know, putting together a slide deck, like all of those things. Those are the sorts of things that AI should be doing because it's not customer facing. We want to build that same level of trust in the way that we do content and the way that we do our outbound. Everything that is prospect and customer facing needs to be top tier because of what we do and because of the thesis of our company.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So it's like if we can take all of the skill set that you're trying to like double down on with your BDRs or with really anybody who's customer facing, how can we actually focus mainly on that so they don't have to waste their time with the other stuff? Is that like the long-term vision where every hour of the salesperson or BDRs person, I know you said they're all the same, and I definitely agree there. Would you say that those are all, if we could spend every hour of their day only on customer facing, like highest skill set activities, do you think that'd be best case scenario?
Absolutely, yes. That is their job is to have conversations. Their job is to go and talk to people. That's exactly what they should be doing.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of the time, like, so I work on a lot of like full cycle AE, but it's kind of in tandem with our BDRs here as well. I'm just focusing on the outbound motion. What do you feel like takes most of your BDR's time just in general? Like as we're thinking about where can AI try to capitalize on their time even better? Where are they maybe wasting time? Where does even not even maybe not just your team, but just teams in general, where do you think BDRs waste the most amount of time?
Okay, so teams in general, I'm going to speak to what I did whenever I was a BDR first, because that's my experience. I spent so much time moving leads from tool to tool to tool. So I'm going to go build this list in Zoom Info. I'm going to move this list into the CRM, and then move into the sequencer, and then I'm going to move it from this sequence to this. So much of my job was just moving names and CSVs from place to place. Right? And report building and list building probably took a majority of my time. I spent so much time prospecting because the list strategy, right? You should be very careful about who you target. My SDRs don't build lists. Like they're just living in a different world. They've never updated a CRM. Like all
Mm,
of this is completely foreign to them. Where I see them losing time is probably in things like I talk about glamorizing high effort activity a lot with my team. It is really easy to go, I'm going to go make 100 dials because it feels good to make 100 dials and it's a grind and it's hard work. Same thing with like, I'm going to go make a dozen videos to send out to prospects today. Is it actually the best use of our time, or are we excited about doing something that's hard and a challenge? So paying attention to, am I doing something because this is the best way to have a conversation, or am I doing it because it's going to validate me that I'm doing a good job?
I'm a very firm believer in that. Like when I was an IC and I was a full cycle seller here, and then back when I was a BDR, like my experience was very similar. Like you just started talking about like Zoom Info to outreach and Salesforce. Like I definitely lived that like every single day. I feel like a lot of the time actually ended up getting wasted. Not even just wasted, but trying to hit a dial metric. Let's just say, not even like just because I want to make 100 calls because it feels good. But some companies actually lay out like you are required to make X number of dials per day. And I almost feel like the mentality around that for a BDR or a salesperson takes the focus away from making those highest possible converting actions more just to hit a metric. Like, do you guys have any sort of like required dials in place with what you guys are doing now? Or is it much more focused on whatever you can do that's going to be actually revenue producing and something that you actually know is the best possible action versus just, here's what's required of you in your seat.
Yes, this is probably one of my more controversial takes. My team does not have a KPI. There's not a, hey, you have to make this many dials a day. We do have goals that we build in, like how many conversations can I have today, or how am I going to get those conversations? There's goals of how many conversations am I going to put towards closed lost versus towards this different channel or this different channel, right? But it's different than, hey, I'm going to make 100 dials, or I'm going to add 20 prospects into sequence. And I think what happens is we get so caught up in those KPIs and are like, how do I maximize my day so I can hit this dial count instead of how do I actually talk to people? And those are counterintuitive. Those goals contradict each other. When I was at SDR, I would catch myself like calling and hanging up, calling and hanging up. I probably should not admit this. I'm going to get fired. Back when I was an SDR, though, I was like, okay, I have to make 200 dials today. So how am I going to hit that number? Well, I can't do it if anybody answers the phone. Or I can't wait very long. I can if they take longer than 3 or 4 rings to pick up, I shouldn't call them, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm focused on optimizing for dial count, not focused on optimizing for how many people can I talk to today, how many people can I convert today. The other way to measure this would obviously just be meetings booked, right? But that is a little bit further down the funnel. It's not an activity that somebody can control. Conversations we can control, conversations we can optimize for.
Yeah, I'm actually so glad you said that out loud. I feel like everybody behind closed doors has talked about dialing just to hang up, to hit a number. And that's like the first time I've actually heard it out loud with somebody else. But it's something that we would go out after work and people talk about it. Or you'd go home and you'd be like, yep, this is what I did today. It's like I just had to hit the metric. I'm so glad you said that. I feel like that's something that a lot of people are going to be able to relate to. I feel like you kind of got into it a little bit of like what some of those other KPIs are besides just like a metric KPI. And walk me through that thought process a little bit more too of like whether it's number of accounts moved to close lost or maybe number of conversations had. Like where do you guys start to really evaluate success of your outbound team?
Yeah, so I'm very big on data-driven decisions and like using our personal data to define what needs to be true for us to hit this quota, right? So if you have a quota of, let's say you need to book 15 meetings this month, okay? Well, how many conversations does it take for you to get a meeting booked? Do you know? If you do know, and we can go and like, if we don't know, we'll go and do the math. We can go and actually pull your stats and here's your call to connect rate. Here's the conversation to meeting booked rate. We can do the same thing on LinkedIn or the same thing on email. And eventually you'll have a number. You're like, all right, I need to have for every meeting booked, I need to have 3 conversations, right? Okay, that means this month I need to have this many conversations. If I do the math backwards, that means this many per working day. I can go above that, and that'll help me set up for the days where I can't get anybody on the phone, right? So instead of working backwards from the funnel perspective all the way to dials, we're just working from the conversations. And that actually forces you to be much smarter about where you put your time. So if you know you have to get 12 people to talk to you today, the way you use your time is probably not going to be on the phones. It might be, depending on who you are and the dialer that you use, the data that you have. For a lot of reps, if you have like a 5% pickup rate, what would be the what would be the math here? If I do some quick napkin math, I have a 5% pickup rate and I need to have 12 conversations in a day. That's
Something along the lines of like 220 calls. That's just a guess. I don't have
Thank
a
you.
calculator,
I
but
think that's right. I was gonna pull up a calculator, but I appreciate you doing the math in your head. Yeah, it's 220 dials. Okay. If my pickup rate's 5%, but I have a 10% reply rate on email, well, it's gonna be a lot easier to get our email back. Well, what about by channel? If I work closed lost, is that a higher likelihood of getting a conversion than if I'm doing net new? Okay,
mm,
let me put time here. If I'm selling into verticals, so if I go, okay, but my reply rate in real estate is way higher than in architecture. Well, now I'm going to go and put my time into this specific persona and this specific industry and this specific type of outbound. So I'm getting much more strategic as a rep about where I put my time because I'm not thinking about the activity itself. I'm thinking about how do I get people to talk to me? What's the highest chance of getting a conversation today?
yeah, I think that's something that we can kind of dig into that we might slightly disagree on, but I'm
Okay.
actually more curious what your overall perspective is. But it's just like, how do you evaluate maybe like quality of a conversation that books a meeting versus maybe a conversation that just gets started? Because obviously, if we're tracking like we need X number of conversations to book a meeting, how do we start to layer like the value of a conversation when you get someone on the phone versus maybe a conversation of someone just replying to an email but maybe not agreeing to a meeting? I'd love to see kind of how you guys look at that, just because the overall perspective, in my opinion, is I still to this day think the phones is the best chance to book a meeting. I always think it's going to be industry specific, but that was just a lot of my personal experiences. I actually got to a point where I didn't even send emails because the reply rate was so low with all the different sequences that I was being given and even trying to do it a little bit more personalized myself. It just got to a point where I was like, the amount of actual manual effort that goes into sending these to the 0% reply rate of getting meetings didn't start to be seem
Yeah,
worth the
doesn't make
time.
sense.
And obviously that to your point, it's like that's where I'd be like, I'm just going to focus on phones and I'm not even going to touch anything else. So I'd be curious, like, where you guys kind of evaluate like effectiveness across the different channels.
So, step back just real quick. When you say that, what you're doing is exactly what I want my reps to do of taking ownership of what am I supposed to do, what's going to work best for me with my industry, with what I sell to get me to this. So instead of just blindly trusting a process and going, if I make my $50, I'm going to hit quota, I'm actually thinking through the process of should I be sending emails? Should I be doing this? What is actually getting me meetings right now? And how do I go do that? And so I'm trying to maximize my conversation to meeting rate. I'm not living in that space of how do I just get conversations. I'm trying to think through like what is actually strategically the best move for me. And I'm not going to waste my time on something that's getting a 0% reply rate. It might be the phones. That being said, whenever I was running emails selling into IT, I had a 28% reply rate. That's higher than my pickup rate. That was a good way of wasting my time. And if I had gotten stuck on the KPI of being like, all right, that's cool that I have a 28% reply rate, but I still have to make 100 dials today, I would have wasted time on the phones, even though the phones are great and I love the phones and I love cold calling.
A quick question on that one, actually. Like, let's just say we took like that idea to the extreme. Would you only focus on email because it has a better rate in general and just not make any calls? Or where do you guys start to evaluate maybe the balance between all the different activities?
So find the channel that works best for you and then use all the other channels to feed into that channel. So if I'm going, hey, the phones are the absolute best for us, we have a fantastic meeting, like conversation to booking rate. Say I have a rep with who had, I actually did have a rep who had like a 48% conversation to booking rate on the phones. Okay. So this is clearly going to be your best channel. How do we make it better? Well, what if we use emails to like tell people that you're going to call around a certain time? What if we send a LinkedIn message every time that you miss somebody to be like, hey, I just called such and such number. Is this the right number for you? Or when would be a better time? What if I start using my other channels to empower the channel that's working best? And now I'm focusing on using them for like incremental impact on that main channel. I'm not trying to run them as separate channels. So it's not taking as much time and I'm still focusing on what's going to work best for me.
I love that. So almost like in that exact example, using the phone calls to leave voicemails and let them know that you sent them an email, like for example,
Exactly.
to point them towards the channel that has that highest success rate for you guys.
Or if it's LinkedIn, like, "Hey, the reason I was calling is I actually sent you a LinkedIn message, but I don't know how often you use LinkedIn. Most people don't. Is this a better way to reach you?" And so now I'm pushing people towards LinkedIn even as I'm giving them a new opportunity to talk to me. But I'm taking whatever my best channel is for myself and using that as the point that I'm going to focus, and everything else just feeds into it. I do want to step back, though. Something you had said, you were talking about being full cycle. Something that we had talked about was people who are focusing on just conversations as a whole, right? And like what counts as a conversation? Are we inflating that number? Is this a good number? So, as an AE, this is something that you learned pretty early on, which is that having a lot of pipeline is not always good for you. What happens when you inflate your pipeline?
Well, when you inflate the pipeline?
Yeah, whatever you are too optimistic about your pipeline, how much of a pipeline you have, or if
Yeah.
you're,
All you're
yeah.
really doing is throwing your own hopes around and then also setting yourself up for a failure when it comes to pipeline review, that's for sure.
Okay, so when you get to that pipeline review, now it looks like, hey, I need all of these deals to be able to hit my number. If my win rate is 2% versus 10%, well, now I need 5 times the number of deals in my pipeline for me to hit my quota. And so now the expectations for your like outbounding is so much higher, right? The
100%.
inflated pipeline works against you every single time. SDRs get to learn this at my team just a little bit earlier because it's like, hey, if you are counting things as conversations that were never about the product, they were never going to move you forward, well, now you've inflated how many conversations you need a day. This is making your life worse, not
Mm.
better. But if we're really intentional about like, hey, I'm going to count ICP conversations with the right persona, the right industries, with like we actually talked about the product. Well, now I am going to have a much more realistic expectation every day of what I need to go and do. And it just teaches them that a couple months earlier than they would learn as a full cycle rep or as a, AE1.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. How much of that do you think is just a like overall coaching and mentality framework for your team to almost just take the fear of this whole daily KPI thing out and be way more focused on here are the actual actions that should get you to success here?
When they first start, I'm giving them like a, hey, this is the team's average. So we're going to start here. This is the goal. And normally they're going to come back and be like, wow, it's really hard to get people to talk to me. Like I thought this job was going to be super easy. It's just talking to people, right? Yeah, it is. Getting in front of people is hard. So let's focus on just optimizing for how many conversations we can have in a day. And so they're going to go through it. They're going to test a dozen things in their first month to be like, all right, I'm going to go send video calls today. I'm going to send voice messages today. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. So their first month just becomes a game of experiments and trying new things and trying to figure out what works for them and learning from all the other SDRs in their team. And by the time they're off ramp, they've probably gotten some level of data to be like, oh, I'm kind of good at this thing and this thing got me a meeting. I'm going to go dive into that thing more. But that puts them in this mindset of constantly experimenting and almost thinking about being an SDR like a marketer would think about marketing of what can I test? What can I go try? What's going to work best? Instead of, hey, the phones are the way or hey, email is what I do. And I really want to avoid building an identity of I am a cold caller, I am an emailer, I am a this, and really just encourage an identity of I'm an experimenter. I'm going to go try things. I'm going to go figure out what works.
Yeah, be like, I'm an experimenter and I'm an optimizer. It's like I'm not just gonna always experiment like continuously if I can find something that does really work. There's no point in obviously turning down the opportunity to go after the most optimized process. I love that mindset for the reps. I feel like it gives them like the creative freedom, but then also like the hope and the progress to know if I do find a channel that's going to work for me and I'm learning from the people around me who are already successful, it almost kind of paints that path for them. Are you guys like operationalizing that kind of into a training program and an onboarding program? Or do you kind of feel like the trial by fire, letting them work with their peers also works really well just in terms of figuring out that path for themselves?
So I believe in both things. So we do have a system. I do have like a Notion doc. It's like, okay, here's everything in the first week you're going to walk away. And that's going to be let's learn every tool. Let's go through. You're going to learn each of these different channels. You're going to hear from other people about it. I also believe in throwing them in the deep end after that first week and being like, all right, now I'm shadowing you. Go figure it out. Like I'm gonna hang out with you while we're doing it. You can ask me questions, but this is on you to figure out. Go try things. And so they have someone there they can talk to, but I'm doing my own thing and I'm letting them go through that process of trying and failing a little bit so that they can develop the ownership of it's my job. I'm responsible for the outcome of this. I can't rely on other people to tell me what to say and what to do.
Yeah, for sure. And like to that vein of what you said the new people say a lot of the times, like they go out and try it and they come back and say, "Wow, like this is harder than I thought." Like having
Yeah.
conversations is harder than I thought. Obviously, we're saying like different people have different strengths across whatever channel they end up really narrowing into. What do you find is like one of the most consistent skill gaps when someone first starts of like being able to have conversations versus not having as many conversations?
I sound like such a guru when I say this, but the resilience, your emotional resilience and your invincibility, for lack of a better phrase here, it's not that you shouldn't be impacted by failure or something not working, but your endurance and ability to regulate failure when something isn't working right away is so important. If you are the sort of person who very short-tempered, very quickly quickly go, "Oh, this isn't working. I'm done. I can't do this." The more you spin out, the harder it gets and you create the self-fulfilling prophecy of it won't work, right? Because you get worse and worse at doing your job the more that you fail. If you are giving yourself a like, "Okay, I'm just going to shoot for the next win. This doesn't have to work. Failure is just market data. This is just new information about what's going to work and what isn't going to work for me." You're going to probably do really well. But can you regulate that? And we're all salespeople. We're terrible at regulating our emotions and being patient. There's a reason we're in sales, right? We like to win. We don't like losing. So building in that resilience and learning that skill of failing in a way that doesn't impact our ego is so important.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I become very recently, in the last like 3 or 4 months, I've kind of been looking at this framework of how do we chronologically identify what a skill gap is. So the way that I kind of see that is like if you have no idea how to use the tools, it's not really going to matter how well you can prospect. If you don't really know how to prospect, it's not really going to matter how you do your outreach and like all these different funnels, all the way up to like you closing the deal. And my thought is if we can identify the biggest gap and the biggest leak in a reps process, that is our highest possible leverage action we can take as a coach to like improve them. So I guess I'm curious like with you how you guys are building your team and like doing all these different things. What is actually one of like the skill gaps that you guys have a big focus on? Because like for ours it is a lot of like cold call conversational skill and the nuances there. I'd be curious what one of the biggest focuses is for you guys.
Yeah. So when I'm hiring, I do tend to lean very green and very like early career. So some of the things that we get that is really a high benefit is one, they have much more patience and much more energy. They're less likely to be impacted by failure just because they're young and they're scrappy, right? It's a part of being very early career. Some of the downsides of that is there's less familiarity with other industries and with how businesses work and how decisions are made. And it's easier to make things about yourself because you don't have that context. You assume that if something isn't working, if somebody doesn't talk to you, it's your fault. It's about you, right? So developing that ability to contextualize and understand businesses as a whole is probably the biggest skill gap that I focus on when I'm training my reps because so much of sales is just contextualizing what the conversation you're having with the fact that this is an entire business and they have multiple priorities and there's a budget and there's evaluation processes and there's a legal department. All of that stuff you know because you closed a deal. When you first get started, especially in your early career, you haven't worked at a lot of companies, you don't understand how those decisions are made. So when someone doesn't buy, it's your fault.
Yeah. I think I love that word you use, contextualize. Like I've been kind of coining a term around here in this office, like we call it contextual framing. And that's even just from a conversational skill perspective. Like how can I
Yeah.
contextually frame the questions that I'm asking to for where the person I'm actually talking to is more likely to talk to me. Some people tell that story of like where you can tell a story of like how you did it with a previous customer, but I think it's even more narrow to like instead of asking a question like how many people do you have that would use this system? It's something more along the lines of a lot of the times, if I see a team that's doing it the same way that you guys are doing it, they have anywhere between maybe 5 to 10 people or all the way up to like 100 people. How many people do you guys actually have on the team that could use something like this? Like even a super narrow framing of how to conversationally upskill your skill set just for just for talking. Not even like the cold call skill per se, but almost like conversational skill. And that's why I'm so glad you said you work with greener reps, because I'd be super curious where you guys start to maybe work on the slight nuances of even just conversational skill, let alone like sales skill.
I mean, gosh, a lot of what you're talking about is the pretense of the call, making sure the pretense of the call matches throughout the conversation. So if I start the call, I'm trying to think of a pretense that I might go off of. Let's say it's a closed loss deal. So I'm like, hey, Jacob, the reason I'm calling is because I see that you're listed as the head of IT at this company. And we had spoken to you last year about solving X, Y, and Z. Well, you're going to go, okay, so this is somebody talking to me about my account, right? If
Hmm.
I flip that switch and I ask you a question that doesn't align with that narrative, like, hey, tell me how many people are on your team, you're going to be like, well, don't you manage my account? Like, that stops matching, and so you're gonna get more and more impatient because the story doesn't make sense. So that is one of the things I talked to my team about. I was like, okay, how do we make sure that the narrative across the entire conversation makes sense to the prospect and matches how they're thinking about this conversation? Does it make sense to talk to you? So there's that piece of conversations, no matter where you're talking to people, is does it make sense to talk to you right now? Does your pretense for the conversation make sense to the prospect? The next thing is why you specifically. So there's the why am I on this call? Are you on this call? What are we here to talk about? Why am I the person at this company who's calling you about this thing? So can I contextualize my place in this conversation? And a lot of times SDRs really forget that. I think AEs can do the same thing where they're like, well, I'm in sales. Like they know what a salesperson does. But voicing your context in relation to their account can help so much.
100%. What if it wasn't like a closed loss? Let's say it's like obviously like just net new, completely cold. I feel like there's always a way to add the context, whether it's like research or just anything that you have that you can bring to the table. I really love what you're getting at of like actually communicating what our value is as a salesperson, not just rolling over to the fact of, oh yeah, this person's probably not going to care about me. I always took that in a vein of really letting them know that like my job in this call is actually to get a better understanding of your guys' current situation to see if this is even a conversation that we can have. And I actually found that that line of questioning versus just pitching right away or pitching super early usually gives you some at least some conversational buy-in, even if it's not like business buying process buy-in quite yet. At least they won't hang up in your face. It always
Yeah.
seemed better when you don't pitch right away and you don't always have to lead with too much of like a textbook problem statement if you can actually give some form of research that's about them and add the context about them. I'd be curious what your thoughts are on that because I've been really kind of focused on that the last couple months and it seems to be working well. But obviously, everything's different per industry and per role and things like that.
Okay, so we might disagree on this. I fully believe in asking for the meeting up front on a cold call, even when you don't have a signal. And making the point of the phone call the fact that I'm trying to schedule a meeting. The reason I like it is one, it allows people to opt in and opt out very easily. But two, you're never questioning why am I on this call? The reason that you're on the call is to decide whether or not it makes sense to schedule a meeting, right? So it's very clear from the beginning of the conversation. Here's the ideal outcome for this seller or this person who's talking to me. And I'm negotiating whether or not scheduling a meeting makes sense, not buying this product, not trying this tool, which for an SDR is so important because most of your job is just initiating conversation. It's not trying to get buy into a buying process yet. So whenever we're doing those like net new conversations, the way that I teach my team to do it is you start with that framework of, hey, Jacob, the reason I'm calling is to schedule a meeting with you. I saw that you are this person. So I saw that you work with the sales team at, I'm trying to remember where you work in,
Yeah.
I saw that you work with the sales team at Engine. We help sales teams with topic. I'm going to fill in this topic. And then I'm going to pause and say, but before I pitch you on anything, I don't know if this is even relevant to you. And I'm going to ask an opt-in question like, do you guys use HubSpot or Salesforce? I'm going to ask you a this or that question. And I'm moving that conversation away from scheduling a meeting to deciding whether or not it's relevant
Mm.
on the call. And notice I don't have to have a signal to do this. If I have a signal, it's great. I can replace I saw that you're this person at this company with a signal. Like, I saw your post about this, or I saw that you recently started this, or I saw that you got some funding. It's where that signal would fit. But I don't have to have the signal to move the conversation into relevance.
Yeah, it makes sense. So I'd be curious what your thoughts are on this because it's gonna depend on like per product, in my opinion. Like so, for example, like Engine, we're a travel management platform, right? So there's a basic qualifier of does a company travel? Because if they don't travel, it's not even a qualified account. And I've
Yeah.
thought about it from some of the other industries of like, for example, I used to sell contact center services, and the idea could be if they actually don't have an in-house contact center, then this conversation's not even qualified. So the thought is almost how can I actually get some contextual framing and conversational buy-in, almost using qualifying process-based language to even know if this is someone who I could book a meeting with. Because what's interesting with us is, like, I'd be curious, like, what's your like number one ICP? Is it like sales directors or like sales managers?
Any manager or above in a customer facing team. So that could be sales, that could be marketing, that could be CS, that could be account management or onboarding.
Is it safe to say that any of those people technically would be a qualified ICP as long as the business
Oh,
ended
yeah.
up being in like a buying cycle?
Count as king is what I tell my teams. Like it always starts with does this company even count? Because it doesn't matter if the person's a great fit, if the company's not a good fit. But if I talk to the wrong person at the right company, I can still get a set. So
Yeah.
we're gonna start with the company, and then yeah, any of those people at the right company would count.
Because that's the interesting part with some of the stuff that we're working on, and I've talked to some people in a similar. I think contact center maybe is a good example as well, but maybe something more broad. But for example, like a travel coordinator makes a lot of sense as like a textbook ICP. But a lot of companies don't have a travel coordinator. So there's people like it could be a project manager, it could be this or that. It's like these random titles could actually be the ICP. So a big part of our sales process is actually how can I qualify if this could be the right person to talk to because it's actually not given. So I'd be curious what your thoughts are on maybe a cold call that is more designed for actually qualifying versus a cold call that's meant to actually book the meeting. Because that's
Yeah.
actually something I'm starting to separate out of think how can I have conversational language as something we train that could work for either, but it's you actually have to have the qualifying conversation first sometimes.
Okay. So I think I would still lead with the, hey, the reason I'm calling is to schedule a meeting, but just to make sure this is relevant. And I'm going to still ask that question. And the question's probably going to be, are you relevant to this topic? So are you the person who handles like the travel bookings for Engine? And you're going to probably pause and be like, yeah, I do handle that. I also like the word responsibility here, if you can use the word responsibility, because if the answer is yes, now it's your job to talk to me. And if it's no, well, then it's your job to point me to the person who is responsible for this thing. So if I use that word explicitly, now it's your job.
Yeah, and I feel like you might have gotten this question before from anybody if you've like told them this, so I'll just ask it as well. Is like, do you guys get any of the like normal, just straight up front sales resistance of like, oh, meeting, like you're a salesperson, see ya.
I mean, yes, but I think people, for the most part, like that you're upfront about what you want from the call. So normally you go, hey, the reason I'm calling is to schedule a meeting. You stop talking and you let it sit in the awkward silence for a second while somebody decides whether or not they want to talk to you. They might hang up. But most people are going to be like, what is this about? Why would we talk? What would this meeting be for? And so they're giving you a very natural place to talk about a topic. And it doesn't feel pushy because you're not going, hey, let me tell you about my product up front. It actually gets less sales resistance because I'm not launching into a 30-second spiel that you can barely understand and process about what my
Yeah.
product does. You are making a conscious decision of asking me, what are we here to talk about? What is this for?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm almost curious too, like, when if you were to say, like, "I'm calling to book a meeting with you," you give the pause, and they just go, "What is this about?" Are you guys typically just giving an elevator pitch right at that point, or are you almost taking that opportunity that they've given you to actually talk to just generate a more conversational conversation with the person? Like, are you doing more elevator pitch? Are you doing more like a qualifying question about maybe their role or what they currently do for sales?
So, my goal anytime I talk about the product is to get to a question. So, in this situation, if I launch into an elevator pitch and I'm like, "Yep, we help with this." You're not left with a question. Now, if I ask you a question, I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. I'm talking about topic, and I'm gonna make that very short, maybe 2 or 3 words, and then I ask you another question. Let's say I ask you, "Is this even something that you're responsible for, though? Are you the person responsible for this?" You say, "Yes." Now I can move into the value prop, and that value prop end goal is for you to ask me, "How do you do that?" So I'm still gonna keep it very, very short. I'm never going into a full 30-second elevator pitch because the elevator pitch is meant to have a value prop and context for that value prop. I'm trying to break that into multiple pieces. So I have my big picture value prop. You ask me, how do you do that? Or what does that look like? I answered that question. And then I have another qualifying question to keep that conversation going. The entire thing should just feel like a back and forth. It should feel like a dialogue.
Yeah, I like that a lot of, like, always just getting the conversational buy-in as you go. I think being able to actually ask the right question as you go is probably, like, the nuanced skill between, like, the people who are the really good callers and people who maybe still have some stuff to work on. That's what I'm starting to feel is it's, like, knowing when and where to ask the right questions to the right people is how you actually get more conversational buy-in. Like, this might be a hot take, but, like, we talk about show rate being a huge thing. Like,
Yeah, it's
you can you
important.
can book you can book all the meetings, but if they don't show up, it's not really gonna matter, and sometimes we can break that into skills like, how good is your follow-up email? Or are you asking for the meeting invite live on a call? Or some of these things that are a little bit more trackable. I think your cold call skill and, like, your actual ability to have a good professional conversation with somebody, whether that's your tonality, asking the right questions, making it very relevant to who it is you're talking to, I think that skill set in and of itself makes your show rate better. I know it's kind of a hard thing to almost track, but I'm trying to actually think like how do we operationalize some of these skills that I'm very confident will increase show rate because they just feel that you're very professional with them. You've given them relevant context. That's why they're going to show up more than just like a little gimmick that you can try to play with the stuff you do as well.
Gosh, Jacob, it's like you're setting me up to pitch. Like Ask Elephant is to operationalize this. Stop. I'm gonna have to pitch Ask Elephant and keep it up. That is one of the things that we do as part of conversational intelligence is measuring how do these different aspects of a cold call or of a demo result in closed one or a show rate. Overall, though, I completely agree. that the show rate is based on the value you bring into a cold call. It is a different skill to get a yes than it is to get a show.
I like
And
that.
I knew on rep whenever I was an SDR myself, who I used to say was bullying prospects into taking a meeting and saying yes on the phone. So he wouldn't get off the phone with them. And so if he could get someone who was nice enough to stay on the phone, he would just keep on asking over and over and over. It didn't matter how qualified they were. He would keep asking until he got a yes. His show rate was terrible because they didn't want to take the call. They were just saying yes to get him to leave them alone. So yes, of course his show rate was terrible, right? So he might have had really high volume and number of deals, but his show rate was down. I've known other reps who were significantly lower than the rest of the team on volume, but the quality of their sets and the pretense they had for their calls, the setup was so good. They had 90, 100% show rates. So it's always this balance. And there are absolutely conversational and soft skills that go into making someone want to take a call, not just saying yes to get off the phone.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, it's like to your point, it's like if that's what we can start to coach on and really lean into with certain reps is like, okay, you're getting the yeses, but like where are the other gaps? Like I'm a big fan of like just the leading and lagging indicators of what's actually moving the needle here, like where actually is the success coming from or where is the failure coming from, not just the metric. It's like I said about the dial counts. Like we don't want to just track dials, we have to track conversations. Were they even good conversations? Like at what point did this call go wrong? Kind of some stuff like that as well.
Yeah, you do have
Yeah,
to
no, that's
earn
great.
these questions, though. When we talk about earning the question, like, I don't get to talk about show rates until we have volume of meetings booked. Show rate is not a conversation I get to have yet because we just aren't getting meetings on the calendar. Same thing with conversations. Like, we can't have a conversation or a question about are we having good conversations until we're having conversations at all. We can't talk about targeting and whether or not we're talking to the right people until we're talking to people. And so when I tell my reps, they'll get so caught up in one specific metric. They're like, man, show rate is so important. Like, it is. You're going to have to talk to people first. Like, we can talk about optimizing that metric down the line. We have to earn the right to optimize that metric by starting down here, which is just to who do I talk to? And can I get them to
That's
talk
right.
back to me?
Yeah. You just word for word outlined what I was saying earlier of how I'm really leaning into like chronological gaps. Like exactly that. It's like we can't optimize a metric if we don't have this stuff beforehand. And I think honestly, the way that that is really helpful for teams is the baseline of that is you need to put in more work. If you're not actually doing the actions that are required, but not just as a KPI, but just genuinely like doing your job, then there's nothing we can start to coach on. So, and as we work our way through that, the chronological order of a deal, if your process is really set in stone through everything up until like closing the cold call, for example, it allows us as like the coach to really, really hone in and be more skill focused. And I think that is something that's actually been really motivating to the reps that I've been able to work with.
I love that. I see so many reps who get really caught up in like, I'm going to learn all of these skills and I'm going to get really good at this before I do the work, before I talk to people, before I make cold calls, instead of just going out and failing a little bit. It's a fear thing, right? If I don't want to go be bad at this, I want to be good at everything before I do it. But you have to go be bad at it to earn the right to get better. And whenever we talk about earning the right, there's actually some pride in this later down the road because when you get to some of these problems that are good problems to have, like hey, we have, let's say I'm an AE, like I'm doing fantastic on discovery and scheduling next steps, but I'm having a really hard time getting more stakeholders involved. Well, now I've earned the right to be talking about that problem. I have mastered every step up to this problem, and so now I get to master this problem. That's exciting. That's a good thing.
Very exciting. And then you can start like training nuances instead of just like overall frameworks of how to do your job. Now it's how do I get better at my job, which I think is a super, super exciting thing for people. And one of my favorite like personal things that I've heard, whether it's work or otherwise, is the work comes before the belief. Like you can't you like if you just blindly believe in yourself, it is helpful, but you got to just put in the work and start to actually identify where can I improve before really just having the belief. That was one of the things I heard on a podcast maybe 8 years ago that I've always kind of enjoyed.
I love that that stuck with you. One of my AEs very early on, who was fantastic. I loved working with her. Her name was Sarah Himes. I one time asked Sarah, like, hey, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? If you're feeling like you're not good at this job, you shouldn't be here. And she kind of laughed and was like, I'm good. Like I get better. Like if I ever don't feel like I'm good enough, I go get better and I go do a better job. Just outdo yourself in competence and doing the work. So to like being a rep in that space, especially as an SDR or like as an AE, When you find yourself in that space of I'm not good enough at this to be doing it, well, then go get better, go practice it, go learn the skill. And then now that's not a problem.
Yeah, definitely. I know, I'm not you talked about maybe sounding like a guru before. I know one of the quotes I like is actually from Alex Hormozy, but he says, like he says, "Do it so much volume that it would be unreasonable for you to not be successful." So it's like, if you're really feeling like you're not there, just do more
Go
volume. It
outwork
it
the
at least
problem.
gives us data. Exactly, just outwork the problem.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I'd be curious, just like as we're kind of coming to the end and finalizing up here, I would love to hear, like, really for you personally, like, what makes you, passionate about working in this space and in sales specifically? Because just as you're talking about it, like, you clearly care about it. You love, like, the strategy. This has been a great conversation. I'd be really curious, like, kind of what is, like, driving that for you, and maybe, like, why you got started in it in the first place.
So I got my job by accident. I didn't apply to be in sales. No, I'm not even kidding. I applied to a virtual assistant job. They called me, were like, "Yeah, can you come into an interview tomorrow?" And it was this recruiting agency. And the next day I show up, it's an interview for a BDR role. I had no idea what BDRs were. No clue. So I got into this industry completely by accident. What I fell in love with was one, the process of learning and getting good at something, right? Like, as I learned about it, I was like, wow, there's a ton of potential for this, and I'm terrible at it. But I really like a challenge. I like learning new things and taking something I'm bad at and turning it into something I'm good at. I'm kind of addicted to that process of optimization, always have been. And sales gave me that opportunity. The other thing is that as I've grown into this space, I get to take other reps and help them become this thing. And getting to see into my reps to be like, okay, you have so much potential. You're going to be so good at this thing. Like, let's get you there. Let's turn you into who you're becoming. Let's help you move your life forward. That is an addictive process as well. There's so much validation in getting to build others up.
Yeah, I think it's, like, the most beautiful thing ever. Like, going from trying to just be a highly successful IC to actually leading other people was a huge shift, and it's like there was no better feeling than watching another rep go and, like, be successful in the stuff that you guys are working on. Like, I think that's the best feeling ever.
Yeah, well, and then there's going to be at a startup. So whenever I got here, there was no sales process, and I got to be had such a huge impact on my company, right? And so I could look back at the revenue we had as a company and be like, oh, this is all stuff I sourced. I did this, right? We did this together, but also I brought it in the door. And as the company grew and it outgrew me, I could still say, hey, the system I built, what I created, is now creating jobs for all of these different people, and all these people are here because of the work that we did then. And I'm getting to bring in new people and continue to do that. That was explosive growth, right? That constant validation loop of impact is so addictive as well.
Yeah, that's super, super impactful. That's awesome. The last question I would wanna ask is, like, if you this is something I've been really leaning into as well. If you were to just give advice to someone who's coming in to be a brand new BDR, I know you said you hire pretty green. Like,
Do.
what would be your overall simple advice to someone who's coming in brand new?
I like to tell people to be a sponge. Not that you need to take everybody's advice, but you need to hear everyone's advice. Go learn from every single other person that you can talk to who's clearly good at a thing and ask them to teach you that thing. You are not going to do everything they do, but you're going to absorb as much of it as you can and squeeze it out and take whatever it is you want to keep, you're going to keep, and the rest of it you can ignore. But get very good at learning from other people and setting yourself up in that posture of I'm going to learn everything and like know how everybody is doing what they're doing best, and then take the pieces that you want to keep.
I love it. I think that fits so well with, like, the biggest thing I'm probably gonna take away from our conversation was just what you were talking about of really optimizing your time into the thing that works best for you. And I feel like every new person that comes in can kind of take that, where if one person's the best cold caller and that works for them, and one person's the best emailer and that works for them, it's like, how do you just take the pieces that are gonna fit with how you wanna really start to work your process forward? And I feel like that's actually the formula for a ever growing successful team, especially when you have a culture of collaboration as well.
And it really is true whether or not you're in sales. Like we're talking about it in specifically the SDR sales world, but this is so relevant to everyone of go find the thing that you are absolute best at and like build around that thing. Use that to get better at the other areas of your life. Anyway,
I
now I
agree.
really do sound like a guru.
I can tell you're obsessed with optimization. It's awesome. Um, no, this was such a fantastic conversation. I'm so glad we were able to carve out some time to have it. And I know at some point we can connect about some Ask Elephant stuff too. I know we talked about a little bit here, but I'm excited to keep watching what you guys are doing, and start to see you guys do some big moves in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. This was a pleasure.
Of course, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Of course.